Hello. Today, I want to share a story, not about a person or a place, but about a moment you've felt your entire life. A moment so small you barely notice it, yet powerful enough to change how people see you. It's the moment when words stop, when no one speaks, when time stretches just a little too long. This is the story of the awkward pause. Stop talking. Feel that? That instant after sound disappears. The air shifts. Someone looks away. Someone clears their throat. Someone smiles for no reason. The room suddenly feels smaller, heavier, like something is expected and everyone knows it. That feeling has a history, and it's older than language itself. Before humans had words, pauses mattered more than speech. In the wild, sound meant life. Footsteps meant movement. Voices meant proximity. Fire crackled. Wind moved leaves. Silence wasn't calm, it was information. A forest that went quiet meant a predator. A pause in noise meant danger. So the brain learned to pay attention to gaps, to treat silence not as rest, but as a signal. That instinct never left us. Even now, your nervous system reacts to silence before you can think about it. When sound stops unexpectedly, your body wakes up. Your heart rate shifts. Your attention sharpens. Something might be wrong. Something might be coming. That's where the awkward pause was born. When humans began to speak, silence didn't disappear. It became complicated. Words created expectations. If someone started speaking, they were supposed to continue. If they stopped, the other person had to decide what it meant. Were they finished? Thinking? Hesitating? Judging? Silence introduced ambiguity. And humans hate ambiguity. As language grew, societies quietly built rules around timing. When to speak, when to wait. How long a pause is acceptable before it becomes strange. These rules were never written down, but everyone learned them. Speak too quickly and you seem anxious. Pause too long and you seem odd. Interrupt and you're rude. Wait too long and you vanish. The awkward pause became the space where judgment lives. In ancient courts and councils, silence became a tool. The person who spoke last often controlled the outcome. A long pause could pressure others into revealing more than they intended. Someone would rush to fill the gap, and whoever breaks silence first gives something away. Uncertainty, eagerness, fear. Silence became power. Leaders learned to use it. Negotiators relied on it. Interrogators mastered it. Say nothing long enough, and someone else will speak for you. But outside positions of power, silence felt different. For ordinary people, pauses became socially dangerous. A pause could signal rejection, disinterest, disapproval. And because humans are wired for connection, anything that threatens belonging feels painful. So we adapted. We learned to laugh when nothing is funny. We learned to say so and yeah and anyway. We learned to keep talking, not because we had something to say, but because silence felt like exposure. The awkward pause wasn't something to understand. It was something to escape. As society sped up, silence shrank. Public speakers filled every second. Radio hosts eliminated dead air. Television added laugh tracks so you'd never feel alone with a pause. Music followed us into elevators, stores, waiting rooms. Silence became something to cover up. Then technology arrived, and the pause followed us. Messages became instant. Replies became expected. Typing bubbles appeared, then vanished. A pause that once meant waiting now feels intentional. Why haven't they replied? Did I say something wrong? Are they ignoring me? Silence stopped being neutral. It became personal. The awkward pause moved from rooms into screens, and it got louder. But here's the strange truth. Awkward pauses aren't uncomfortable because nothing is happening. They're uncomfortable because too much is happening. In silence, the brain turns inward. There's no distraction, no script, no noise to hide behind. You become aware of yourself, your thoughts, your doubts, your place in the interaction. Silence removes the performance and leaves the person. That's why silence feels unbearable in small talk, but powerful in intimacy. With strangers, pauses threaten connection. With people we trust, pauses create depth. The same silence that feels awkward in a meeting can feel meaningful between close friends. The pause itself never changed. Only the relationship did. And that's why the awkward pause never disappeared. It survived evolution. It survived language. It survived technology. Because it isn't a flaw in communication. It's a feature of being human. Every awkward pause is the brain asking an ancient question. Am I safe here? Do I belong? What happens next? So the next time a conversation stalls, the next time no one speaks, the next time silence stretches just a little too long, don't rush to escape it. You're not standing in emptiness. You're standing in one of the oldest moments humans have ever shared. A pause where meaning waits to be chosen. And what you choose to do in that pause matters more than you think. Because silence doesn't just reveal discomfort, it reveals power. In any conversation, the person who can tolerate silence the longest quietly takes control. Not by force, not by volume, but by restraint. They don't rush to explain. They don't fill the space with noise. They wait. And waiting changes the balance. That's why awkward pauses feel asymmetrical. One person is calm, the other feels pressure. The silence itself doesn't demand anything, but the human mind does. It starts offering information just to make the feeling stop. That's how secrets slip out. That's how negotiations turn. That's how decisions are made without being spoken. Silence invites motion from the other side. But most people never learn this. We're trained to respond quickly, to prove engagement, to show enthusiasm. Silence is treated as failure, a missed beat, an error in the flow. So when a pause appears, we panic. We over-explain. We soften our words. We retreat from our own opinions. Not because we changed our minds, but because the silence asked a question we didn't know how to answer. This shows up everywhere. In arguments, silence can feel like punishment. In friendships, it can feel like distance. In love, it can feel like loss. A partner goes quiet, and suddenly the room fills with imagined meanings. Are they angry? Hurt? Falling away? Silence becomes louder than words ever were. But the truth is, silence isn't always a signal of absence. Sometimes it's a signal of processing. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's care. The problem is we're rarely taught how to tell the difference. So we default to fear. Children learn early that silence can mean trouble. A quiet classroom, a silent car ride home, a pause before a parent speaks. The body remembers. Silence becomes anticipation, waiting for judgment. By adulthood, that association is deeply wired. That's why silence feels heavy even when nothing bad is happening. And yet, there are rare moments when silence transforms. When two people sit together without speaking and don't feel the need to escape. When a pause doesn't beg to be filled. When quiet feels shared instead of threatening. Those moments feel different because they are different. They're pauses without evaluation. Silence without expectation. Stillness without danger. They're what happens when the brain finally stops scanning for threat and starts resting. But reaching that point takes trust. In others and in yourself. Because silence forces you to confront something modern life works hard to avoid. Your own inner noise. When the world goes quiet, thoughts get louder, doubts surface, unfinished emotions rise. Silence doesn't create them, it removes the cover. That's why we avoid it. That's why the awkward pause feels awkward. Not because it's empty, but because it's honest. And that's the final twist in the history of the awkward pause. It was never the pause that made us uncomfortable. It was what the pause revealed. So the next time words fade and silence steps in, try something different. Don't rush. Don't apologize. Don't fill the space just to feel safe. Sit in it. Let the moment breathe. Because hidden inside every awkward pause is a choice. You can escape it, or you can listen. And sometimes, listening to silence is the first time you actually hear what matters. And maybe that's why the awkward pause has quietly followed us through every stage of human life. It shows up when something real is about to happen, before a confession, before a decision, before goodbye. There's always a pause, because truth rarely arrives at full speed. It hesitates. It gathers itself. It waits to see if the space is safe enough to land. That's why the moments we remember most aren't always filled with words. They're filled with what wasn't said. The silence before an answer, the pause after a name is spoken, the quiet that follows a realization you can't take back. Silence marks the edge between who we were and who we're about to become. In that sense, the awkward pause isn't awkward at all. It's transitional. It's the mind catching up to the moment. It's emotion arriving before language knows what to do with it. We call it awkward because we don't like being between states. We like clarity, labels, endings, beginnings. But pauses exist in the middle, and the middle is uncomfortable. Yet without pauses, nothing would change. Music without pauses is noise. Speech without pauses is chaos. Life without pauses is exhaustion. The pause gives shape to meaning. And maybe someday we'll stop treating silence like a mistake. Maybe we'll learn to recognize it for what it is, a signal that something important is happening. a moment asking for patience instead of panic. Until then, the awkward pause will keep doing what it's always done, waiting. Not to embarrass us, not to trap us, but to remind us that not everything needs to be said immediately, that some things need space, that some truths arrive quietly. And if you ever find yourself in that familiar moment, words gone, silence stretching, time slowing, remember this. You're not failing at conversation. You're standing in the pause where meaning is born. And that moment has been with us since the very beginning.